So recently I've been asked a lot about how I make interiors for Halo. This is going to be a general guide. There's going to be a lot to discuss in this, so stick around. First off, you're going to want to answer a couple of questions. You're going to want to know whether you're going to be using this as a modular kit or if it's just going to be like a one piece. If it's just going to be one building with an interior, or if it's going to be, an interior modular thing so you can extend the entire area and then just kind of make an outer plating later. Now, if this is the first, where you're just creating a building, then it's a lot simpler than you might think. But if it's the latter, you're going to want to stick around. Now, first off, one of the most important things is understanding the metrics. Before you start any kind of interior, especially if you plan on using it for a modular set, you want to keep it consistent. So this is the approximate size of how big Master Chief is in metrics. So you would have 70 meters tall, you have about 50 meters wide, give or take, and then 16 meters dummy thick. Me personally, what I would do is 50 meters by 15. I always try doing about 15 meters for thickness. That usually gives you a pretty decent amount of area to add windows, doors, whatever you might want to add for details inside the walls. Now, everything I learned and I'm about to go over, I learned from the level design book, or at least a decent majority of it. They have a lot of good things on here's the metrics, modular kit designs, and this kind of goes over like all of the different types of basics that you're going to want to take a look at. So I'll leave a link in the description so that you guys can also kind of check out this website, because there is a lot of good information as far as getting your level designs done. And of course, first things first is getting the metrics down and building block out assets of what you want. Now, I kind of did this for my own sake so that I had something to reference. So I used graph paper and I created, each and every type of corridor, type of wall, type of everything that I could possibly create. I labeled them all and I labeled the sizes, the dimensions, and everything. And I kind of gave it some basic details just so that I would know when I ended up going into it, like what kind of details to add in. So I definitely recommend doing this. You don't technically have to, of course, but this is really a good aid when it comes to doing this. So before we actually get started in Blender, I'm going to go over some shortcuts that I definitely recommend that you kind of learn, get down, maybe keep a mental note, whichever you want to do. So obviously I have X-ray mode on right now. So if I wanted to, I could see through these objects. Really helpful when you're doing interiors, because all of your walls are pretty much going to be on the outside, so you're going to want to be able to see in that way. Another really good tip is in here where you have face orientation. I have a shortcut for it, so I have Alt 3, because 3 is to see the faces and 2 is edges, right? So Alt 3, you'll be able to see your face orientation to see. So if it's blue, obviously that face is sticking out, compared to if I were to flip these, then it would be all on the interior, and then all that would be playable is inside this little area, just so that I can give you some sort of reference as far as what face orientation does. So here in the mesh, we're going to go to normals, and we use flip a lot, so I definitely recommend that you add it to your quick favorites. Now, I believe mine already is on there. Yep. So Alt-N, it's already in there for Alt-N, but I definitely recommend using quick favorites, because all of these are my very common used things that I always use. So I keep these here at all times to make it a lot quicker. So something else someone pointed out, this is, a work in progress map that I'm working on for someone. So they had an issue where they couldn't really see very well because of the camera. So if you hit N in order to come into this tab over here, come to view, you can change the focal length of your camera so that it's a little bit more widescreen, so that if you need to see the entire corner, or if you're too bunched up, you can do that. Just remember to change it back when you actually need to take a look at it, though, because sometimes with the focal length, your brain can play tricks on you, especially when it's normally set to 50. At least I had the issue where I tend to not realize when the lines are straight because it'll be at 25 and it just won't look right. But of course, this is more so that your thing doesn't clip into it, which is another point of adding these in to make sure that you're not, clipping in or clipping out. So an example, if you can notice how jagged all these lines are. So if I were to change this to 1, all of a sudden that looks pretty smooth and pretty clean, looks back to normal. So I'm going to show you 3 different methods to this mainly. So the first method is I just kind of added it in a cube, right? And now all of these faces are on the outside. So if I want to flip them, it's really that simple. I just flip them. But of course, this does still come into issues of, how would you connect them? How would you add things into it? So we're going to add a door frame into this real quick. So coming in here, as you can see, I have, the main cube itself. I added a Boolean modifier. These will be your best friend. This is probably going to be one of your biggest lifesavers, whether it be using union or difference. Obviously, you always gotta, sometimes fast is better, sometimes exact is better. It really just kind of depends. Now, of course, for the door frame, I have all the faces flipped and they're looking on the inside. So all I have to do is actually look at this modifier, and if I hide this, of course, it's gonna make it look a little bit different. It's gonna make all the faces on the outside, but that's all right. So we're going to just apply this really quickly, and then as you can see, there is some overlap here, so that's always kind of something to be cautious about. There's 2 things you can do. For one, you can turn auto merge vertices, and then it'll just merge those as soon as you move them. Just make sure to turn this off so you don't accidentally redo it. Or what you could also do is you can move those in. Let me make sure. Move those in, select it all, hit M, and merge by distance. Then it'll remove those extras. So, of course, since we added that in, it kind of messed everything up. We can see face orientation is the opposite, so we can just flip that again, and we're back right as rain. Now, of course, you want to keep all these measurements consistent, especially when you're first starting making all these pieces, because you want to make sure that they're able to connect. And say you have, a 100, say it's, 100 meters long or wide instead of 200 meters, then you're probably going to want some kind of transition piece in order to transition into that different corridor. Granted, it depends on how you want to approach it. You can approach it with using transitions, or you can just try, brute forcing it, but transitions are usually a lifesaver in that case. So as far as these, like when you're doing door frames, window frames, I honestly recommend making those as separate models. And then like if you were to come in here, make this, your separate model, and whatever size you want to do, keep it consistent. But say that this is going to be your window model, keep it somewhere, off to the side so that you can just duplicate it, bring it wherever you need to, use it in the thing so that you're not constantly remaking it and having to double check what sizes you had. You'll just have the same size right here. And another tip that some people don't always know about, so I have Asset Browser. You can see some of the assets that I've been working on over here. Now, in order to use this, you go to Preferences, File Paths, and then Asset Libraries. So, each of these are going to be individual things. So this is a folder, and all of the files in that folder are going to be able to be seen in these libraries. So you just add a new one. I would go to my blend file. I have my asset libraries right here. So let's say I wanted to do medieval town pack. I would add that to my asset library, and now I would be able to see whatever I have in there. Of course, to actually add it, you would need to right click, mark as asset, and then it would show up in here. Same thing with materials. If you don't have the materials marked as asset, you more than likely won't see the materials in here. Now, my materials in here are kind of bugged because for whatever reason, when I was setting these up, it wanted to use the normal map instead of the actual diffuse in order to take a screenshot. And since it won't really let me undo that with all of the progress I've made, going forward, I've decided I'm not going to use normal maps as far as this, because as long as Halo still sees the normal map, it's okay, but you don't really need it in Blender, and it makes it a lot easier to be able to see what you're trying to do, so you know what textures you're actually going to be bringing in. And of course, I have all of my textures down here from the void map and from all these different maps, so I definitely recommend you doing that. It would probably help you out very much in the long run. And then of course, say I wanted to just rename this to 200 by 200 hallway, like let's say hallway A, whatever. So that's just gonna be whatever I name it, and then I can make that into its own thing, or I can hit M and I can create a new collection for when I finally finish the assets or the blockout assets, add that to that so that I can kind of keep it out of the way. So that is the majority of the first part. So now we're going to get into the second part, which is probably the very tricky part because you don't want to overdo this. So there's a modifier in here, and it's a solidify modifier. Now you can change this to thickness of whatever you want. You say you want, if it's 1, then it will be going whichever way the normals are. So if it's -1, it'll be the opposite way of the normals. Even thickness is a must when it comes to keeping things consistent. Now, of course, doing it this way is tricky, but this is really more for if you have a completed building already, you can kind of you can either do that, or I'll show you another method here in a few minutes, but this is also more a good way of starting corridors. So, people would just make this really simple and just kind of do their own thing, and doesn't really matter too much because all of this is just to solidify. And of course, if I remove even thickness, you'll see that all of these vertices aren't exactly 90 degrees with each other, and that will bite you in the ass later if you forget to do that, because then when you go and try to plug and play all of your models, they just won't really work. But I will say, when you're doing this, I only recommend really keeping the solidify modifier for like the initial block phase. When you actually start to add detail to these, you're going to want to apply this, because if you don't, each and everything that you do in this is going to possibly mess up the vertices in the future. So say you're starting to extrude detail, all of a sudden now it starts to mess up this backside, and you really don't want to have those kind of issues, because then it deforms the entire thing. So this is really more for getting your shape there, just starting, and then you can just build your corridor after you have it, and then we can just hit apply while we're outside of edit mode, and then that makes that a lot easier. And of course, you'll be able to see measurements. I have my measurements enabled for now, just so I can show you guys edge length measurements. But that is pretty much the solidify modifier. It is very useful, but it is also very dangerous for the most part, because it can easily screw up your dimensions if you're not careful. So it's honestly up to you how you want to use that. I use it more so for buildings than anything. So here is going to be another method. So let's say that, this is how I'm going to do my building. Let's just say we're going to do 100 meters that way, and let's say that these are going to be walls. So if we want, again, whatever you do here, so I'm beveling these in order to make these, whatever dimension you start beveling for, you want to keep that consistent, because again, just like with the modular kits, it's really important that all of these match and line up. Honestly, what I could do is I could take it a step further, and I could just do that just to make sure that all of these will match, because we only need these, but we can always make sure that it works. So for example, I'm going to do 50 meters up, and then that would be that. So I can, of course, come in here, move these, move them. I highly recommend also keeping this set to vertex, and whenever you're moving them, you can hit control and it'll automatically snap them. That's my personal preference. Of course, you don't have to do that, but it helps out a lot. Now, just to be clear, this method really is more for, this isn't really for one, interior kit. This is more of, you create your entire blueprint out, you create your entire map, and then you create your walls, but you only keep, your edges for the walls. And then once you have all your walls ready, you know exactly where you want to do things. Then you can hit the bevel that out, and then you can start to just extrude the walls out to make it a lot easier. So this is going to be the last method that I'm going to show off. This is one of the methods that I use the most. So let's just say, that this is your building, and, you're pretty okay with it. It's not too bad. Let's go 0.8. Just kind of, extrude along normals. We'll do it that way. I always do offset even. Okay, so let's just say that this is your building, right? Now, there's a few different things you can do, of course. You can, try doing a solidify modifier, -1, you can do 15, and then depending on how that looks, let me change focal length real quick. So, of course, because I did it with the roof is really kind of wonky, but say you were doing it with just like a cube itself, you'd have a lot easier of a time. But in this case, I'm not going to be doing that because we already went over the solidify modifier, but this is going to be going over the Boolean tool, and this is going to be how I do things. So duplicate the face, right? Scale by, 0.95 or generally whatever small dimension that you want to do it by. I'm going to move it 5 meters. And then if I come inside here now, and I look in here, now I can extrude to that. And then if I move it 5 meters backwards, now we notice that, it's all inside. So it's still part of the same cube though. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit L to select all of it, hit P to separate it. And then we're going to select this, we're going to Boolean, and then we're going to look in here, use our little eyedropper tool to select the cube. We're going to get rid of that and see how that looks. So looks like it's not doing what we want it to do. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to flip all of those, see if that does anything different. And it looks like it did. So it looks like it created an interior for us. So I'm going to apply that. And next step is really what's going to get us. So scale that down. This is going to be our door. I only put 5 for the thickness, so I don't want to overdo this. So I'll do 10, and then I'll select this, and I want to move it right to the center. So if it's 10 and it's already sticking out, I believe 7.5 should make it right in the center. What I can do is I'm going to move it up 2.5 because I really don't want to get rid of this little lip down here. That could be useful in the future. Now I'm going to do that. Door frame B, B. All right, and origin to geometry. Like I said, all of these I always have. So these I have for importing because of how often I use them. And I also have shortcuts for exporting. So just in case anyone wants to, take my approach, I just created shortcuts for these. So Shift Control E allows me to export it as an AS file quickly. JMAs are Control Shift M, and then Control Shift J is for JMS. Honestly, these are like lifesavers because these make it so much quicker than having to constantly go back. The one thing that will save you the most time, both in making interior models and just overall in general, is learning how to get shortcuts. Learn how to make your own shortcuts. Like, if you can find out what things you need to create to make your life simpler, do it. Like, absolutely. Like, there's plenty of add-ons, there's plenty of tutorials out there. If you take a little bit of extra time and just learn how to do like the small things quickly, you'll be able to maximize efficiency so much more. And I really recommend it. So, finishing this up, we're going to add the door frame into it. And now, as you can see, oh, right. So it's a little bit wonky, but that's all right. So we're going to just apply this right now. And so as you can see, kind of a little bit off, and that's all right. So what we can do is we can just do that. And just like that, it looks like normal. Merge vertices, and there you go. Now, of course, you can, add your windows in as needed or whatever. And for example, say you didn't want to, remove it, right? Because I don't know if I showed off the union tool. So if I were to move this, let's just move this like 5 meters in. Actually, not 5 meters because it's 5 meters thick, or should be 5 meters thick. So we'll do 2.5. And then let's just say, that we have that. Oops. Then, all right, so let's say that that's our window that we're trying to do. And maybe we can come in here and, oops, let me disable edge length for the moment. So if I were to come in here and just move this whole thing to here, move it 0.5, actually we'll do just 1, and then separate that. All right, and then origin to geometry, we're going to add an array modifier. We're going to do it the opposite direction. We're actually going to do 1.15 just to separate it a little bit. And that looks good. So honestly, we can add, another array modifier, and this one we can do in Z. And if we really want to, we can just kind of bring this down 35, and that should look about even. Now, there's a few things that we can do. Boolean modifier, gonna do that. We're not gonna do difference though. We're actually gonna do union, so we're gonna hide that. And if we were to just apply this, we'll see that all of those have just been, joined into this one mesh. So, of course, sometimes it could be a little tricky because sometimes the edges can kind of be wonky, but that's all right. If you need to, you can always use the knife tool and, separate your geometry. Like, for example, if I wanted to just do this, you could just start adding those in, because when you start to use the detriangulate, or the triangulate, whatever you want to call it, that sometimes can mess this up, given that it's going to have connections to so many faces, so it could mess it up. So I always recommend keeping an eye on your topology as you go. That is generally all that I have for making interiors. I know this video was kind of long. I hope I can edit this week, but hopefully this video helped you guys. I know that I haven't really made many videos in a while, but I'm kind of trying to get to making most of them. But stick with me, and we'll try to weather this out together. If you ever have any questions, you can either send me a message here, join my Discord. I'm always active on there. Or you can always DM me on Discord. But hopefully that video helped, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.